Hello, how are you doing today? I hope you're fine. Things are getting tough, especially for Museveni, and so much evidence is coming out. As a matter of fact, because the government is in panic, that is Museveni's government, they are starting to make up stories. They are starting to manipulate the algorithm on the internet, trying to portray Museveni as a gentleman who is still influential in the region, that is in the entire Great Lakes region, and so on and so forth. What is interesting today is that the politics of Somalia actually affects Uganda in one way or the other, and everything that is happening in Somalia also kind of affects us indirectly or directly. That is, how geopolitics happens, on the continent, especially a case in point in Uganda, especially where we have had a leader who has been in power for over 35 years. Now, the interesting thing here is the story that has been making rounds on the internet, and that has been the headline all over the continent. It is the story that Ugandan UPDF soldiers actually killed 189 al-shabab militants. Now, this happened 5 days ago, and it was really interesting on the timing of the story, because whenever you see today Ugandan soldiers, as well as Museveni, making a statement, you always have to think twice before you actually take it in, be it if you are a news media, be it whatever you are, because this is a gentleman who stole an election. They have an electoral commission that does not know how many number of people actually voted. They do not have the results. They cannot even compile the results. So when they say that they had killed 189 people, I was really, really skeptical. And guess what? I was actually right. My skepticism was actually right. Because I've been following the events in Somalia. I've been following the Ugandan government and their activities in Somalia. And trust me, whatever word they say, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. Now, as you can see there, that shows how the world reacted to the news. I recently told you that Museveni has a PRF farm, and I'm yet to discover what PRF farm he is using these days, that is crafting stories, that is telling him that do this, do that. It will try to cover whatever has been happening in the country. It will try to cover the accountability that you need to do in the country for the recent things that you have been doing. Now, as you see, the story actually made a lot of headlines. All of a sudden, Bobi Wine was covered. This story actually covered Bobi Wine a few days ago. That is how they are manipulating the algorithm. That is how they are manipulating Google and all this kind of thing, such that when you put in Uganda, al-shabab comes up, portraying that, Ugandan soldiers killed militants or Islamists or so-called terrorists, and then it gives Museveni a very good image. As you can see there, Ugandan soldier airstrikes in Somalia kill 189. VON News. Reuters. Ugandan army says it has killed 189 al-Shabab. Al Jazeera. Uganda. Everything Al Jazeera. Indian Express. ABC News. Uni India. African CGTN. The nationalnews.com, The Guardian, PEC. I mean, everywhere. Even if you go to the second page, it is the same thing. Shinua Net, whatever. Everything, it is all the same. USA Today, and all these kind of guys were all reporting on this particular story. So all of a sudden, the story of Bobi Wine was actually covered by this particular story. And now that is really, really interesting, because whoever now searches Bobi Wine a couple of days ago, this is what they were actually being given. Now, to go into detail in the story, of course, I had to look for a source, at least that I take with credibility. That is the Daily Monitor, and I had to look into how actually the Daily Monitor covered this particular story. Now, the Daily Monitor said that the Uganda People's Defense Forces UPDF contingent under the African Union AMISOM in Somalia has killed at least 189 al-Shabaab fighters in a raid that could be the biggest ever since UPDF deployed in Somalia. According to a statement issued by the UPDF deputy spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Deo Akiki, on Friday, Ugandan troops raided al-Shabaab hideouts in thickets of Sigare village, approximately 99.5 kilometers southwest of Mogadishu city. Quote, the interdiction and on-spot ground target separate separate operations in Sigale Ademole and Kaitoi villages neighboring Janare in Lower Shabelle region saw the forces put out of action 189 Al-Qaeda-linked fighters and destroyed a number of military hardware and items used by the terrorists. Oh, he was so right on point. Like, he was so clear and everything into detail. The statement reads in part: the target raids, according to the UPDF, also destroyed 2 mounted weapons called the Technical and motorbikes in separate fire strikes. In Donakafedao hideout, that name is quite hard to read, but yeah, I'm sorry, my Somali brothers and sisters. Hideout, 7 kilometers west of Janal. The UPDF ground area targets successfully disrupted an al-shabab scheduled meeting and injured several. The statement further reads: unlike in the past, the UPDF now has attack helicopters and have attack helicopters that have augmented the UPDF firepower against the al-shabab. Now, according to the commander of the Ugandan troops in Somalia, Brigadier General Don William Nabassa, who is under sanctions, by the way, so that you can know, they did not suffer any losses or injuries. Okay. This is what he said, quote, "We are committed to ensuring and maintaining security and relative peace," said General Nabassa during his operational assessment of frontline troops at forwarding base in Janale, adding, given the available capabilities and knowledge of the terrain analysis, such as spot-targeted operations will continue in efforts to degrade and defeat al-Shabaab insurgents, even in the wilderness. Now, they go on to say that in 2015, al-Shabaab attacked UPDF base in Janal in what was one of the deadliest attacks that left 19 Ugandan soldiers dead. As such, intelligence-led operations have equally forced defections, where one al-Shabaab low-level commander, Eden Osman, reported with his submachine gun, 5 loaded magazines and 63 rounds of ammunition to Somali National Police Station in Koyolel town, approximately 75 kilometers northwest of Mogadishu city. The statement reads. Now, that was the statement. Everything in detail, everything well written, like well described. Even noting the number of people killed, noting the number of weapons taken, the number of people who actually surrendered, the areas, everything in detail, as you can see, according to the Daily Monitor. Now, this was written on the 22nd of January, 2021. So, okay, I went on Twitter and started looking at people who are following the events in Somalia. And then I came across a gentleman known as Rashid Abdi. Now, Rashid Abdi is the first person who brought this to our attention. He said in a tweet, Uganda claims its AMISOM contingent killed 189 al-Shabaab is false. No respectable Somali source is willing to give credit to the report, military or security. Seems like a piece of fiction to show Museveni's great utility to the world at a time when he is under severe pressure at home. Now, this gentleman writes that tweet on the 26th of January 2021. If you see his profile, he's a researcher, analyst, Horn of Africa, Gulf, depth, insight, nuance, security, migration, stabilization, political and geopolitical developments, etc. Now, so this gentleman, of course, has his links and has his sources in Somalia. He says that there is no evidence that shows that actually this event happened. The event that I've just read for you in the Daily Monitor. Actually, you should archive that article in the Daily Monitor before they pull it down. They might pull it down days later. I know they will pull it down because they have been caught red-handed. So Rashid Abdi says that there is no evidence that this thing happened. So you're like, why? Now, I was like, maybe Rashid is not really a credible guy. But when I saw the Ugandan representative and ambassador, as well as permanent representative of Uganda to the UN, United Nations, known as Adonia Ayebare, commenting on this gentleman's tweet, he said, Brother Rashid, and this is a Museveni stalwart, he says, Brother Rashid, hope this is not meant to demean the role played by UPDF in the stabilization of Somalia since the inception of AMISOM. Liberation of Mogadishu, deployment of the UPDF in AMISOM is a Pan-African venture and does not confer legitimacy of any sort. And then he tagged a gentleman known as Moses Kisa. Now, what is interesting is that when you see a Ugandan representative, diplomat, ambassador, and permanent representative to the UN commenting on this gentleman's tweet, of course you know that the gentleman is legit. So this gentleman, Adonia, works on the issue, and he tells him, I hope you're not demeaning blah, 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 blah. But he doesn't confirm that whether the event really happened or not. For him, he thought that the government, or that this gentleman, Rashid Abdi, was actually attacking Museveni, which actually was not the case. But he was actually highlighting the fact that what the government of Uganda is claiming to have happened in Somalia did not actually happen. And there is no evidence to that effect. That is what the gentleman was trying to address to the world. Thank God for Twitter. Now, a couple of days later, on the 27th of January, a day later, this is what the gentleman says. Of course, he replies that, Your Excellency, Rashid Abdi, the analyst, replies to the diplomat, Adonia Ayebale, that, Your Excellency, I have tremendous respect for the UPDF. Recognize fully Uganda's huge sacrifices, pioneering role in stabilizing Somalia. All I was saying is that the latest claim of 189 al-shabab killed, contested by many. I hold UPDF to high standards. This claim badly dents its image. Now, this is not even a year later when the Ugandan government, of course, has lied about the elections. But now they are caught red-handed lying about killings in Somalia. All right, Adoni Ariela, whatever, the diplomat, replies, Oh, Brother Rashid, I have talked to the UPDF. Actually, you should take a screenshot of Adoni Ayebale before he deletes the tweet. Brother Rashid, I have talked to the UPDF leadership. The claim, quote, the claim is fake news and was not an official claim, and we should treat it as such. Thank you for recognizing the high sacrifices by the UPDF and Uganda to the cause of AMISOM. Well, Ayebale later thanks His Excellency. Now that is what is interesting, that Uganda's permanent secretary to the United Nations says that this was fake news and it was not an official claim and we should treat it as such. But remember in the article how these people detailed how they went, how they carried out the entire mission, how they killed the people, and how even these soldiers surrendered. Was it all made up? Mr. Ayebale, we need an explanation. Maybe in Museveni's government, after all, everyone is not daft as we think. Some people can see the truth and they try as much as they can to bring the truth to us. So Doni Ayebale brings the truth to us. But now, who is lying between the permanent secretary to the UN and the spokesperson of the UPDF, who had a statement that he read out loud and even described the areas where they killed these people? Where are the 189 al-Shabab militants that were murdered? They are nowhere to be seen. There is no evidence. Now, when I read through the retweets, through the comments on Rashid's post, most of the people were saying that it is impossible to kill 189 al-Shabab militants because these people, their fighting tactics are guerrilla war fighting tactics, hit and run tactics. They hit and run. They hit and hide. It is hard to find them seated, 189 of them, or even 10 of them in just one area, and then you take them out. It cannot happen. That is what most of the Somalis actually say. And most Somalis also say that the UPDF in Somalia is only reduced to the role of checkpoints and checking people at the airport, checking people's luggage and things of that kind. There is not much work that they are doing there, apparently, as we speak. So there is no way that the UPDF actually could have killed 189 al-Shabab militants. Now, what is interesting is this. You remember when we talked about that so many news agencies had actually come out to talk about or to show to report about the event, and among those news agencies is Reuters. Now Reuters says story on Ugandan army killing militants has been withdrawn on the 28th of January. So the Reuters has withdrawn the story all of a sudden. Kampala, the story Ugandan army says it has killed 189 al-Shabab fighters in Somalia is withdrawn after Uganda's army said a statement it sent to the media was in fact unverified, unsourced media story. There will be no replacement story. What? Read that again. The story Uganda army says it has killed 189 al-Shabab fighters in Somalia is withdrawn after Uganda's army said a statement it sent to media was in fact unverified, unsourced media story. There will be no replacement story. Unverified, unsourced. So it didn't happen. We took the entire world to a roller coaster ride of lies that 189 people died. It is the same thing they did with the elections. They lied to the people that Museveni had won the elections. We told them to present the evidence. They failed to present the evidence. Just coming up with figures with no backup. Coming up with figures that do not correspond. They are caught. Now, for those of you who know AMISOM is African Union Mission in Somalia. Okay? Now, this is not the first time that there is controversy between Uganda and Somalia, or between Uganda, al-Shabab, and all this kind of mix. First of all, why is Uganda in Somalia? We need to understand. Now, there is this thing known as the African Union, which is a bunch, like it is a group of dictators and a group of African leaders who try to enrich themselves by getting donor funding as well as getting money from Western countries to fight their wars within Africa, actually fighting fellow Africans. Because if Africans actually wanted peace, we can get peace. If at all we have the right leaders that can push for that. But we cannot push peace through people like Museveni, who have their own selfish interests of actually, creating the instability that is happening in Somalia. They are also creating conditions for the same in Uganda. And they have already said that if at all Bobi Wine takes power, Uganda will be like Somalia. That is what they have been telling people. So you cannot have such kind of leaders to fight for peace. Now, too much controversy has been going on between Uganda and Somalia and al-Shabab and the mix. We had the so-called al-Shabab attacks of 2010, 11th July. Should we also say that the al-Shabab attacks of 2010, because this story should help us re-examine every attack that the government of Uganda has said that happened because of al-Shabab. Muslims that have been arrested having links to al-Shabab. All these things, it means they have been made up all this time. The attacks that happened in 2010 in Uganda, whereby so many people were killed, who carried out those attacks? Now we need to ask those questions, because we have been in lies. Thanks for Bobi Wine for coming. That the government of Uganda is now exposing itself. Lying to the people of Uganda. Lying to the entire region. Lying to the UN. Lying to the African Union. So what is Uganda really doing in Somalia? Now, Uganda, because the US was tired of fighting the war in Somalia, so it hired the so-called AMISOM, African Union Mission in Somalia, to go and fight its own war, to fight its proxy war and bring about peace in Somalia by fighting the al-Shabab militants and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is why they say that Uganda is there in Somalia. But not every country sent troops. Uganda sent 9,000 troops out of the 36,000 AMISOM troops in Somalia. Uganda has the biggest number of troops there. So someone would ask, why does Uganda have so many troops there? Number one, the more the troops you have, the more the money you make. Because these troops are directly paid by the American government. and every soldier is paid $550 US dollars. It is actually said that every soldier is supposed to be paid $1,000, but the government of Uganda slashes it into half. Of course, kickbacks for Museveni and the dealers who brought the deal, and so on and so forth. So the take home for the soldier is 550 US dollars. Now, is Museveni there for really bringing peace in Somalia? Definitely not. Museveni is there to get, number one, the support in terms of monetary support from the United States of America. Secondly, he is there to get weapons, because the US not only supplies money, but it also gives them weapons. Now, this is where that story gets interesting. A few years ago, when Uganda had just been deployed in Somalia, the UPDF soldiers started selling the weapons that were supplied by the Americans. They started selling these weapons to al-shabab. They sold the RPGs, they sold the bullets, they sold the guns to al-shabab. The soldiers claimed that they were not getting any money. Now, according to Wired, like you can see here, according to this article, Somalia, how UPDF sold arms to al-shabab. Right? So the US is in this vicious circle, arming people to fight its proxy war, and then these people are selling arms to the US enemies, and in turn they are using these arms to actually fight. So the war continues on because there are so many people who are profiting. So according to Wired, Wired ran a story about this incident, and then they said that US weapons in Somali terrorists' hands. Bad news. In the 5-year-old US proxy war against Al-Qaeda allied Somali insurgents, half of the US supplied weaponry that enables cash-strapped Ugandan and Burundian troops to fight Somali's al-Shabaab terror group is winding up in al-Shabaab's hands. The kicker, it's the cash-strapped Ugandans who are selling the weapons to the insurgents. This revelation buried in the UN. So UN released the report talking about this incident, but they buried it within the report. You know, when they release that big document and you have to read every line in order to uncover such evidence, that's what the UN did, to hide the evidence. Now, this is what they said. How bad is the situation? In April 2011, the UN determined that 90% of all its 12 by 108 millimeter ammunition in Mogadishu was from an AMISOM stock created in 2010. Pelton revealed. Pelton is the gentleman whom they were quoting from. An RPG captured from al-Shabaab was analyzed and determined to have been delivered by Dynacorp to the Ministry of Defense in Uganda. The contract was to supply weapons and ammunition to Ugandan forces in Mogadishu. With the US effectively arming both sides of the conflict, Somalia fighting could go on forever. Absent major reform. This at a time when a war-torn Somalia desperately needs some peace in order to cope with the worst drought in decades. This sort of thing has happened before and is still happening with US paid backtrackers in Afghanistan, even though Mogadishu arms racket casts into doubt plans for military outsourcing. Now, but if he continues to say, if Ugandans, these armies, end up arming their own opponents, how can we count on them actually win their subcontracted war? That's according to the author of the article. So they were asking that why is it that really these people are selling these weapons? Now this is what happens. The problem is that Ugandan army withholds most of the peacekeepers' monthly paychecks of $550 US dollars. Keeping the money in Ugandan accounts, keeping the money in bank accounts in Uganda accessible only by troops' families. Considering limited shopping opportunities for embattled AMISOM troops, you would think that makes sense to keep their money back at home, Pelton wrote. except that AMISOM payment debacle leaves thousands of troops surrounded by tons of weapons, with no way to buy even small things like personal items, like sweets or mobile phone chargers to call home, recharges to call home. So the Ugandans sell their excess weaponry to intermediaries who then sell it to al-shabab. Then to keep track of their racket, the peacekeepers make sure to shoot at every opportunity, burning through an extraordinary amount of ordnance to justify continued arms shipments from Washington. You've heard. So that is what is happening. The war in Somalia, the reason as to why Ugandan Museveni is there, is not to bring about peace in Somalia. Museveni is there to make money, to entrench himself in power, because that is how Somalia indirectly affects our politics in the country. For as long as the US gives him more weapons, for as long as they give him more money, for as long as they train more of his soldiers, we are the ones that face the wrath indirectly. As you see today, it is the soldiers that are engaged in malpractice. Museveni said that he brought back home almost 3,000 soldiers to come and help him with the elections. It is the soldiers that are on the streets of Kampala. These soldiers were armed and trained by the United States government. And that is why we are trying as much as we can in order to let the United States know that they created a devil that is actually creating, instability all over the region. That is what is happening. I mean, that is what is really happening. You get it? So why did they lie about these 189, al-shabab killings? Now, the reason as to why they lied is this, as I wind up, it is because that the US has a new administration. And that is the administration of Joe Biden. You get it? Now, they think that if at all they start writing on stories of terrorism and stories of Islamists and things of that sort, the US will reverse its policy, because they have been holding, Museveni is being held accountable now like never before. He's really under a lot of intense pressure from his biggest donor and his biggest financer. So what happens is that you have to start making up stuff. You have to start making up stuff in order to keep the dollars coming in order to keep the weapons coming in, and things of that sort. At a time when he needs legitimacy, at a time when he needs to be congratulated by the US, he's now playing fake stories, making fake news in one way or the other. Now that is really interesting. I do not think that this shows a man who is really strong. This does not show that the man is really strong, but it shows a person who is so weak to the extent that he has to make up things like he has killed 189 militants. We need to ask questions about the 2010 bombings in Uganda by the al-shabab. Because a person who can lie about 189 killings, I mean, it is really ridiculous. So that is what is happening with Museveni today. It shows that, of course, the gentleman was trying to play a trick, but the trick has backfired, and now the entire world knows. So the entire media that has been taking him serious, I think you should all take him with a grain of salt. Whatever the UPDF says, whatever the government of Uganda says, it is the exact opposite. That is what it is. Because all they care about is money, all they care about is weapons, all they care about is entrenching themselves in power and creating instability in the region as well as in the country. So that's what it is. We shall keep following developments about the issue in Somalia and the militants and so on and so forth. And I hope that the US government is not buying into this kind of crap. And I hope they revise their policy with Museveni as well as his so-called generals. All right. Let us meet again, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep following our updates in one way or the other. This is a big story that I had to share with you that is really, really interesting, especially in the times that we are in. Bye-bye.